2, 1.
Welcome back to another episode of Streetpreneur Podcast, the podcast for innovative entrepreneurs. And we went to the streets again to find you another great entrepreneur. She specializes in podcasting. She's a podcasting coach. So for those that are interested in starting a podcast, want to own a podcast, want to produce a podcast, or just want to be featured on the podcast, we're going to cover everything today concerning podcasting. And I'd like to welcome my special guest today. She's been in the business for years. Her name is Arylle Young.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Well, I'm happy to have you here today.
Nice to meet you, Melvin. First of all, thank you for having me on the show.
Yes.
But you forgot to mention, if you want to monetize your podcast, there's a lot of things that people can do with podcasting, but a lot of people don't talk about the money that you can make in it.
We're going to cover all of that. We're going to cover all of that. First of all, there's over 70 million people who are listening to podcasts in the year of 2023. That number is expected to increase by 110 million listeners by 2029. And the projected revenue growth is $2.84 billion in 2023. And that number is expected to increase by $17 billion by 2030.
Yes.
So I think we're in the right business.
I'm telling you. And you know what? I feel like that's probably even understated, because the revenue that you can get off of these platforms, which a lot of these publications they use to measure success, that's only these platforms. But when you think about the monetization you can do off platform, the revenue is endless.
Okay. Let's get right into it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Podcasting. Is podcasting oversaturated?
Absolutely.
Give me your opinion.
Yes, I will say no. Straight answer is no. The reason that it is, wealth is, and if you guys don't read any books, I will tell you, Secrets of a Millionaire Mindset is absolutely going to give you the basics of just like think more, think bigger, and that's the whole conversation that we're about to have about podcasting. Wealth is not a pie. Wealth is not limited to just a certain amount.
That's true.
And so when you start your podcast, you are creating value just by speaking whatever it is that your truth is. Not only that, there's endless value in the marketplace. So you start inviting guests. Everybody has an opportunity to have their own kingdom. You can have your kingdom and everybody can have their kingdom. So if you use your podcast to amplify your voice, the voices around you, so that they can help other people, wealth is endless. Wealth opportunities are endless. So if you think about podcasting like, oh, such and such is doing it, there's 1 million babies born every day. So you tell me don't have any new babies just because there's a whole bunch of babies here? No, there's a new brain idea. There's a new life-changing idea that's yet to be born, and you could be the one to do it if you start your podcast.
Okay. Let's go back to your personal journey. Tell us a little bit about where you're from and what inspired you to get started in podcasting.
You know what? The way that I got into podcasting is less inspiring than how I actually stayed into it. So I found podcasting through my own coaching business. I started learning about entrepreneurship 2 years after I quit my job in corporate America. Okay. That means I left my job to just really find myself. I thought I had an idea, but I really didn't. 2 years into it, I learned, okay, entrepreneurship is a thing. And I guess I've been doing it all this time, waking up at a certain time, structuring my day, going after a way of getting money. But I think the way that I was surviving for those 2 years is really hustling. So I was doing Airbnb. I was doing every little hustle you can figure out. I was teaching fitness classes just to figure it out. Now, when I got into entrepreneurship, my mentor was crazy about podcasting. And I will be honest, if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't necessarily be as interested. But I learned you could use your podcast to market your coaching business. And so from there, it was a no-brainer. So I was like, I got to start my podcast. I don't know how, because I still felt a disconnect. I was like, no, popular people create podcasts. I'm no one. I don't have an audience. I'm not a speaker. I'm not a journalist. But what really unlocked my mindset was seeing the back end of his podcast, seeing how easy it is for you to create the content, get better over time. It's not going to be perfect your first episode, and that's okay. All you got to do is keep working at it, and that's what unlocked it. So I started my podcast in 2022. It's called the Work and Play Podcast, off the idea that I've always had, which is I want to work and play. I never liked being in a cubicle. I've always wanted to figure out, how do I make money just being me? And I hear so many successful 6- and 7-figure entrepreneurs who speak that language now, but it wasn't around when I first quit my job. So podcasting has really unlocked this like work and play in me. And then I have people on my podcast who share how they actually got to the life that they call work and play. So how do you make millions? Just being who you are.
Okay. Let's talk about quantity over quality. As far as shooting content is concerned.
Yeah.
How important is it to have good equipment, good mics, good camera, versus producing a lot of content and making sure that content has meaning and that it resonates with your audience?
You just said a mouthful. Everything that you just said went to meaning. Like, where is the meaning? A lot of people like to get hung up on the glitz and the glamour of podcasting, but they lack no message. They lack no mission, and they lack no value for their listeners. They're really just kind of doing it for themselves. And you can tell because they're not listening to the guests. They're really just there to say, okay, I got the views. And just because you have those conversations, you know, you get YouTube views, but you're not building a legacy. So in terms of quantity over quantity, I personally think if you're starting out, it's about quantity because you got to get the bad stuff out. Yeah. You got to get all your negative, you got to get your bad ideas, your negative thoughts. You got to get all that out. Let that put that in the archive somewhere when you really start to get good, because now you start to build a rapport with your listeners. You start to build a relationship, and like podcast platforms actually take you more seriously when you post consistently, a lot more frequently. Does that make sense? Yes. So if you're going quality, then you might have different goals. If you have already influence built off before you had your podcast, and you just want to start that podcast, maybe do once a month, but this is a relationship builder. Every now and then it's something for you to just kind of give to your audience as like a, like side value, then quality of your video needs to be good, but you can't forget the message. Why are you having these folks listening to your podcast? If you have that, you can record your podcast in your car and you can still make $1 million. Yes, you can. Like, if you have a message and people are willing to listen to you, the quality of the video doesn't necessarily matter. Okay. But that's not to say that the audio quality doesn't matter. Yes, it does.
Let's talk about monetization.
Okay.
Your specialty. We want to talk about what is the biggest misconception people have about making money with the podcast.
Absolutely.
Because a lot of people think, well, I'm going to put out these quick episodes. I'm going to get $1 million deal from Spotify or whoever.
Yeah.
Just kind of tell us about your opinion and what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think the beauty about my way of getting into podcasts really helps a small podcaster debunk what they think it does, what they think, how they think like millions are unlocked through podcasting. So the word that we're going to focus on is value. So when I started my podcast, the very first person who paid me money paid me $1,500 just for ad sponsorship. So what that means is they paid me $1,500. I recorded 30 seconds to be on my podcast. And I think I put it, at that time, I didn't even realize what I was doing, but I think I put it in there for like 30 episodes. So when you think about sponsorships, it's not just waiting for McDonald's or these big brands to knock on your door and say, hey, we want to sponsor your podcast. You can start where you are. Think about the value that you currently provide. Are you influential? Maybe you don't have a following of 3,000, 2,000, 200,000 people, but can you influence 50 people to take action? And then you can monetize that value by going out to small businesses and offering them the same thing that I did when I first started, a small ad slot on your podcast. When you think about unlocking those millions, like Joe Rogan, even like David Shands, these are people who have built large influence. So yes, you can make a lot of money starting from scratch on a podcast, but you can't cheat influence. You can't cheat that. So if you want to make money from the beginning of your podcast, start with the value that you have right now. Then you can unlock the $1 million slots, because that same way that you communicated your vision, the people that listen to you and the people you have influence over, it's only expanded at a larger level. So when we're talking about how you actually make a lot of money on your podcast, it's about identifying the value. And it's about being able to speak that and get people to take action through your podcast episodes. That can be at a small level or a large level, but it's all the same mechanics.
Okay, let's talk about sponsorships versus paid guests and premium content.
Yeah.
Which direction do you lean more to? I know all three are important components. So what do you recommend for a first-time or a new podcaster?
Yeah.
Because should they focus on sponsors? Or should they focus on charging the guests?
Yeah.
What would be your recommendation?
Well, I think you left two out for me. You said sponsorships, paid guests, and premium content.
Right.
But we didn't talk about affiliate income.
Yeah, we didn't talk about merch.
And we didn't talk about merch, and we didn't talk about having your own products and services.
Okay.
If you're starting out, that's where you should start out. Most people don't have the influence to be out here charging someone to be on their podcast.
Okay.
That's just plain and simple.
Okay.
When we have a conversation about business and value, are people willing to come out of their pocket and pay you for your value? What are they paying you for? If I'm paying you to come on your podcast, that means I know there's an ROI.
Yes.
That means I know there's a return on my investment. Right. If I pay you $15,000 to be on your podcast, that means I know that there's $100,000 on the back end for me to gain.
Right.
Does that make sense?
That's correct.
So I absolutely love that model. Did I use that when I got started? Absolutely not. You can go to my podcast now, and I think maybe one or two broke 5,000 views. Okay. So the money that I received had nothing to do with charging people on my podcast. Okay. Sponsorships. When I tell you sponsorships, I've never gotten paid by Audacity, and I've never gotten paid by any of these like audio platforms where you hear like sponsorships playing on your audio platform. Right. I went to small business owners and they paid me sponsorships. I set up my own sponsorship package and I said, swipe your card and use my Stripe, pay me for the sponsorship. I will record the episodes, and then on the back end, we can have a conversation about, oh, did someone actually visit your bar by watching my podcast? Now we can talk about measuring that influence. You said sponsorships, paying guests, and exclusive content. Do people care to hear behind the scenes? These are all influence. Like the more influence you have, the more you can actually influence people to do those, take action.
Because actually, Wallow and Gillo, $1 million worth of game, their podcast.
Yeah.
He mentioned the same thing you just said.
What do you say?
We just went to all the local businesses within Philly. And we went to each one, and then we pitched to them about what we can do for the advertisement. We'll put you on pre-roll, mid-roll, back end with their own media kit. And he said that's how they started before they got their sports deal.
Yes, that's it.
So he told me, he just said, go to the community. Just go out into the community and then get your advertising.
That's it. Like
whether it's 500, 200 here, 500 here, he said 150 here.
Yes.
And that's how they made their money.
Yes, someone paid me $50 for one episode just to do 30 seconds, $50. Of course I took it. Like we rack those up. That's how you get the money. So those are the influence ones. Okay. But if you really think about your podcast like a business, then you start to then you start to search about entrepreneurship. You try to learn about how do I make money. Okay. So your best bet would be to look at affiliate deals. So bring in guests, not just guests who can talk, but guests who have a valuable offer. Okay. Have a valuable offer so that you can actually bring people from those conversations to take action on whatever you can help them with. And then I said affiliate, products and services. Of course, merch. Like if you have a message, like if you like those podcasters who really just have like a story to tell, they just triumph through something. They're not really trying to sell you on anything, and they still have their 9 to 5 there. Fine. Right. Then attach some merchandise towards that mission, and people will walk out with that same like blessed and highly favored. You know what I'm saying? Just because you wear it and you gave them something to really look forward to every single day. These are influences that we can do at our level. And I say our level, like I said, you can see my podcast. I'm not out here charging millions of dollars, but have I gotten 4 figures for every one of my ads? Absolutely. Absolutely.
I got you. Let's talk about how to market and promote a podcast. If you're a new podcaster, you're having trouble getting visibility on your podcast, what are just some of the strategies they can use to attract viewers to the podcast or just advertise the podcast in general? Yeah. I know most people are going on social media and posting, but what are some of the other methods they could use? Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to go very basic. I think a lot of podcasters need the basics. Do you tell people about your podcast out of your mouth? I meet a lot of people who have podcasts, and they don't tell you that they have a podcast. Right. So at the very least, you need to be marketing your podcast with your mouth, telling people every time you meet someone, you send them straight to your podcast, especially if you started your podcast to help your business. Okay. So are you marketing it when you meet people in person? That's true. A creative way that I actually hear people
promote their podcast is through ads. So there are people you can do Facebook ads. You can also do ads on audio platforms that really allow you to say, hey, I have a podcast that's coming out about X, Y, and Z. Now, depending on how big you believe in your podcast, you can invest in radio shows, audio ads, Facebook ads. What these things do is allow you to drop previews of your episodes, get people interested, and then when they come to your page, let's say it's a social media ad, they can see if they're into what you got going on. And it really is a great way to build followers. Mm-hmm. But when you market your podcast, you have to be clear. It's like fishing. If you go fishing, you still have to be able to cook the fish when they get there. So you can grow your followers by putting ads into your podcast, but you have to have a way of like getting people into your podcast and consuming the content and taking action. So that what that means is having a call to action on your episodes to either click the links that you have to either buy something or get a freebie from you. So like bringing them into the podcast ecosystem that you have, getting them to take action, getting them to post your episode. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about the social media arms, yes, posting your podcast, releasing clips of your episodes, posting lives, like that kind of stuff, this is basic marketing. But get your listeners to repost your content. Get them to tell people, I'm listening to this podcast and this is the value that I'm getting. Because when it comes to the value of like, what are people listening to you for 30 minutes to an hour of? Mm-hmm. You can tell someone all day, like, this is what I'm going to teach you and this is why it's so awesome. But if you can get your listeners to get behind your mission, then you're cooking with grease.
Right.
So there's different levels of marketing, but it starts with you. You have to be the one talking about your podcast.
And how important is it as creating your own organic following, organic subscribers?
Yeah.
So many people are buying followers, buying subscribers for their YouTube channel. Also for, I don't know, so much is in the audio, but it's a lot of it. So how important is having an organic followers versus having a paid following?
Very important.
Right.
So I think this speaks to one of the biggest mistakes that I made. Because I will tell people growing your podcast is scientific. It's really not art. You can get the followers, you can get the monetization on all these platforms by following a specific structure. Okay. The problem that I did is I followed the structure. I posted consistently. I released good episodes. I had great guests. I marketed. I did all the things to get the attention. So the platforms knew that I was cooking. Right. But my problem was having the conversation with the listeners, really developing that relationship with the listeners. So when you say what's more important, organic versus building a following, I say they're both important. Like, you don't want to forget either one. But if you have the paid and not the organic, then it's kind of like an empty shell. So I felt like the podcast wasn't necessarily reaching people at a deeper level. It was getting people interested, but you would see in the analytics, people would watch it, but very few returns. Yeah. So if people don't return to listen to your podcast, they were probably either only there for the guest or they were there for like the one topic that you did, but you weren't hitting them over and over and over with goodness. So you can see that in the content. Organic, you build relationships. People will listen to your episodes even if they suck. They will give you feedback, and then they will stay along for the journey. That's something that when you do get to the conversation of sponsorships, that's when you can have a conversation about why your brand is worth more than the next one. Okay. Because just because this person has 20,000 followers on their page and they don't have any comments, nobody's listening to the podcast, like, that is less value than this person who has 5,000 followers, who gets 200 comments.
Engagement.
Exactly. Like, you have to have both. But if I were to say one is more important, I would say organic, because that's where the substance is. I'd rather have 5 real listeners than 2,000 people who just kind of touch and go.
Okay. And how you feel about podcasts, for video podcasts are concerned? What do you think are some of the biggest genres right now? I know relationships are number one right now as far as getting views and things of that nature. Just kind of give us a breakdown of your opinion on what's being generated the most as far as getting engagement and viewers. What are the hot podcasts right now that you think people are watching? Yeah,
I think entertainment. So I think relationships is actually on the top. Yeah. You'd be surprised. Mm-hmm. Like, there are some niches of podcasts. Mm-hmm. thrill and crime is actually a very top podcast topic. Business is starting to get even bigger because people are starting to realize there's that value of exchange. Like if I get on a podcast, I can go deep with my framework as opposed to just doing a 5-minute YouTube video. So I think businesses has always been big. Crime is really big. Relationships, that's really big. And I like to see the mindset podcast come up a lot. Now, my opinion might be jaded by the stuff that I listen to because I'm also a podcast lover. But those are the top ones that I see. And you can do so much. Okay, so the last one I'll add is mental health. Because with mental health, there's ways to monetize. It might be an icky topic for people to monetize off of your mental health, but there are communities that are building out here that allow you to buy resources to help you with your mental health, whether it's therapy, group therapy sessions, one-on-one therapy. People are monetizing out for those platforms on and off these listening platforms.
Okay. Can you give our listeners some resources that they would use for new podcasters or podcasters that are coming in to help with their podcast, to help grow their podcast or start a podcast, whether it be websites or apps or any other, just some resources that they can use? I think it'd be very valuable to our listeners.
You know, the best resource that I can give them, and we talked about this, it's the monetization blueprint. So I told you that I was thinking about creating a specific product for you guys, for you and your listeners who want to start a podcast. Not only is it going to be just for people who want to start a podcast, but if you have a podcast and you're not monetizing, what steps do you need to take to just take action and get monetized? So this blueprint is actually going to tell you the steps that I went through to get my first $1,500 ad sponsorship. So literally you can just take action and go. It also will tell you how to get your mind into a value mindset. Because if you don't think that your podcast is worth $1,500, then nobody's going to pay you $1,500. Because this isn't COVID times. People aren't just spending that type of money anymore. So you have to be willing to tell people why your podcast is valuable and what type of returns do you think it's gonna yield. If you think it's just gonna be exposure, then say that. And then don't feel guilty about you don't have to feel tied to results if you can't promise results. But if you know that you get consistently 50 people listening to your episodes and they come back because of you, then you can start having $1,500 conversations that allow you to get those sponsorships on the back end. That is going to build your confidence for these like sponsorship deals and things like that on the back end. So if you get this blueprint, it'll give you step by step on how I got my first 15, and then also things that you can do to build your confidence so you can start asking for more.
Okay. On a final note, before we leave, can you give them 5 pieces of advice that podcasters need to know to help grow their podcast?
This is good. This is really good.
Just give them 5 tips.
So the first one is your podcast has value. If you don't know where the value is in your podcast, then the first thing you need to do is sit down and ask, what value am I trying to bring to this world? Otherwise, you just have a podcast like the rest of them and people get tired of listening to you.
Okay.
The next thing is you need to learn how to ask for the money. So, and that allows you to not feel so salesy. So when you think about how you are adding value to other people, then you can now say, just by you coming on my podcast, you can actually make $100. You can actually make $1,500. You can sell your course. Think about it as a value proposition. You're not sleazy. Okay. You are adding value to this earth. Don't focus on the glitz and glamour. Okay. If anything, focus on the audio. Right. But as long as you get the podcast out, you will evolve. Your first one's going to be trash, and that's okay. Let's see, that's 3. 5 for a podcaster. Stop talking about your story so much. Okay. Think about how your story actually helps your listener. Okay. At the end of the day, if you don't have a value proposition, then you are not necessarily... You don't have a viable business. You don't have a viable business. And I think the last one, keep going. Okay. So many podcasters quit in the beginning. That should have been the first thing that I said. So many podcasters quit in the beginning because they're not willing to build the body of work. The body of work is what gets you the money. Because if a business can see that you've been doing this for 50 60 months or whatever, then they know that when you put the money into this, you already are going to take it. It's just like venture capitalists or private equity. People have to go through seed rounds before any millionaire is willing to invest in your business, because they need to know you have the heart to take it. Yeah. So that's what consistency is. Consistency means that you're willing to take it the long haul. You're not just doing this and I'm not going to give you my money. Then, my baby's sick and you're not going to record an episode today. Consistency is going, oh my God. That's absolutely it.
Right. Well, let them know how they can follow you, how they can reach you, how they can purchase your products and your services.
Absolutely.
Just give them your contact information right quick.
Yes. Well, if you want to reach out to me and you have questions, they can actually reach out to me on Instagram. It's Arylle Young _, and hopefully it'll be spelled out on the screen. Arylle Young _. So that's the best way to get in contact with me. Now, in order to start somewhere in terms of this monetization conversation, just click the link in your bio. I'm going to give you a special link that you can click so your listeners will be able to come get the information. And if they want to take action on monetizing their podcast, they can.
Okay. I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule today to bless us with the gems and the information and the knowledge. And I hope your podcast go to higher success, which I'm sure it will, because of your drive and your motivation and everything that you bring, the energy that you put into it.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for coming out today. I want all of our listeners to tune in, watch this episode, give your comments, give your feedback, also listen on our audio platforms. And you all have a blessed, wonderful day, and stay tuned for the next episode. And hit that subscribe button. Thank you.